Welcome to the TAC Index AI podcast, March 12, 2026, where we blend TAC IP data reports and charts with the latest news in all things logistics with a focus on air cargo. Today, our mission is to take a deep dive into a pretty massive convergence of events. We're unpacking how geopolitical conflict, highly volatile oil prices, and shifting U.S. trade policies are sort of all crashing together to impact global air cargo and the broader macroeconomy.
Yeah, and before we really get into the data, we want to make something clear to you, because we'll be discussing the ongoing U.S.-Israel conflict with Iran and new U.S. tariff policies. We are strictly reporting on facts and source material here.
Right, exactly. I mean, we are not taking any political sides or endorsing viewpoints, just looking at how these events actually move the markets.
Right, and looking at the latest TAC index data, it presents this really fascinating contradiction.
It really does, because if you just glance at the global Baltic Air Freight Index, the BAI00, it looks incredibly calm. It edged up just 0.2% week over week.
Right, but underneath that flat surface, regional rates are completely chaotic. I mean, we are 12 days into the U.S.-Israel war against Iran, which has triggered massive Middle East airspace closures.
Yeah, and with those two recent drone strikes near DXB that injured 4 people, tens of thousands of flights are just being forcibly rerouted worldwide.
And the data shows real-time panic routing. Spot rates out of Hong Kong and India are surging to Europe as shippers just scramble for capacity.
But then you look at Frankfurt, and its outbound index suffered a sharp double-digit plunge, a 13.4% drop. Meanwhile, London Heathrow climbed 8.8%.
And Chicago bounced back with a massive 19.9% surge. That drop in Frankfurt is particularly telling, though.
Right, because that hub relies heavily on specific Middle Eastern corridors for Asia to Europe transit.
Exactly. With those routes choked off or deemed too risky, carriers are shifting their assets to paths of lesser resistance.
Which explains the sudden capacity crunches and price spikes hitting London and North American hubs like Chicago.
The math just ends up canceling itself out on the global index. But connecting this to the bigger picture, looking at the fuel market really puts this rerouting into perspective.
Oh, absolutely. You can't divert thousands of wide-body jets around a major conflict zone without burning massive amounts of extra jet fuel.
Right. Brent crude is now sitting at $92.80 a barrel, with WTI at $88.65. And Iran's military command just issued a stark warning for the world to prepare for crude to hit $200 a barrel.
$200. Wow. That kind of energy shock ripples straight from the tarmac to the macro economy.
It does. Vietnam's government is already warning that domestic airlines could face actual physical fuel shortages next month.
But beyond aviation, this is triggering major inflation jitters. The Dow dropped 0.61% recently.
And bond yields, like the 10-year U.S. Treasury and the German Bund, are jumping. Markets fear central banks will be forced to raise interest rates again to fight off this energy-driven inflation.
And just when supply chains are trying to absorb that fuel squeeze,
the tariff wildcard enters the mix. The Trump administration is preparing new Section 301 tariff investigations targeting what the U.S. considers unfair trade practices.
Right, focusing heavily on excess industrial capacity in places like China and potentially the European Union.
These new investigations are stepping in to replace the temporary 10% global duties that were recently blocked by the Supreme Court.
Even though Section 301 probes take months to conclude, they inject an immediate heavy layer of uncertainty into the market.
Whenever tariffs loom, shippers panic and try to front-load their cargo to beat the deadline.
And that front-loading behavior is going to severely worsen the current capacity crunch we're seeing across both air cargo and sea containers.
So why does all this matter to you? Because air cargo rates and jet fuel capacity are the ultimate leading indicators.
Exactly. When it costs significantly more to move goods and the energy required to move them skyrockets, that cost eventually trickles down into global inflation and directly impacts your wallet.
Leaving you with a massive question to ponder. If these regional airspace closures and fuel shortages stop being temporary disruptions and become permanent fixtures of the geopolitical landscape, how will that permanently redraw the map of global trade?
Until next time.